What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Cervantes podcast. Joining me today to discuss white privilege, the N word, all lives matter, police brutality, and systematic racism is dance and criminology major and musical theater minor studying at Hofstra University, Nicole Lorrayne, Binghamton University alum with a bachelor's degree in politics, philosophy, and law and history major, Charlotte Weiser, sociology major and culture anthropology and Africana studies minor studying at Rollins College, Callie Dochterman, Bachelor of Fine Arts film major studying at Hofstra University, Matthew Behm, Hofstra University alum with a bachelor's degree in journalism, Felipe Fontes, marketing major studying at Iona College, Joey Lopez, and video TV production major studying at Hofstra University, Cameron Stone. So the first question I wanted to ask you guys, how do you feel about critical race theory and how do you feel about it being taught in schools?
I'm for critical race theory. I will say I knew the concept of it, but I didn't know the exact name. So when I was told that this might be one of the topics, I had to look it up and ask friends. I was like, what is critical race theory? And I was like, oh, I know what this is. But I don't think it's something that I truly believe through my, study of history and just like, I don't know, living in the US and living in New York and New Rochelle especially. It's something that I don't think I've really encountered being taught in schools, unfortunately.
Right.
I think everyone should learn that. I think education is the most important thing. Yeah. And I think you gotta, inform them when they're young.
I think that it's really interesting coming from where I grew up in, where, extremely white, there wasn't really a lot taught to us in history class and social studies in terms of critical race theory, just because I don't know if the history teachers intentionally meant to do it or what, but there are a lot of things that I had to go and investigate myself about a lot of things, and they seem to just brush over a lot of things, like MLK. They're like, MLK is great, and then they really didn't say anything else about it. They didn't talk about the FBI constantly harassing him, and the fact that our own government didn't want him to succeed and stuff like that. So I think it absolutely needs to be taught in schools because I feel weird knowing that I missed out key points of history just because of going to public school.
I feel like it should be taught because, like, if you think about it, racism is taught, it's learned. And so if kids are unable to learn about what happened in this country and how to stop it from perpetuating, then it'll just keep perpetuating. So, yeah.
I also agree that it should be taught. I don't even think it really is being taught currently, or at least I didn't learn it in elementary school or high school. Like, it took a college level sociology class to finally learn about it. And I feel like it's really necessary because a lot of people that I talk to now don't even understand like the general critical race theory concept of like race is a social construct. People don't understand that. Like, people my age still think it's a like biological reality, and right. So I feel like critical race theory is just like a basic thing that we should be taught in schools. That's my stance.
Right. And Felipe?
Yeah, I'll repeat that. It hasn't been. I never learned about it personally through my educational experience. I do think it's important. Obviously, it's race is talked about so like on like a personal basis a lot of times, where it's like, oh, are you racist to him or are you racist to that? But it's a lot deeper than that, and it's systemic, obviously. And I think learning that and being able to address that, I think that's important, obviously, and just being aware of it. Because if you're aware of it, then I think that's how you can address it. So I think it's something that definitely should be taught. And I'll say it again, like it's not taught, I know, in a lot of places. I grew up in Texas, and in Dallas, Texas, went to public school, and I never learned about it. I never even learned about it through college and in a lot of, classes. Like, I was in a sociology class. It's not something that, we necessarily like covered in depth. So I think it's important, no doubt.
Like, honestly, when I first read, when I was looking over the questions, when I honestly thought about it, I was like, I had to look it up because I was like, I don't even know really what this even is. So after I looked it up, it's kind of just like racism being like incorporated with like education and just like kids getting kind of like put on the wrong foot like from the get. And that's like kind of like how like racism continues on, because like obviously not every person is racist, but like you can get set up to be racist from like your parents. It could just be like your gym teacher, little things like that. If people that are racist are making the curriculum, it like indirectly gets put in, and like that's how things happen. Like,
why do some white people call Black people African American and not just say Black?
I noticed that like, so, you know, we went to a really diverse high school. I
Mhm.
want to say the school's like 70 something percent minority. And by that, it means I'm pretty sure it's like the same percentage of white people to black people at New Rochelle High School. And then the majority is like Latinos. That's the majority of the composition of New Rochelle High School. And I think that because I had that exposure, at least, like I have no problem saying black people, or
Right.
maybe if I'm writing an essay, African American, or I'll write black. It's not, I don't see it as, I mean, I'm not the one that's being offended, but I don't think it's offensive.
Right.
And I think that's probably because I've had the exposure to black people my entire life. So it's like, yeah, what's the big deal? But I think people that maybe were raised in like a more conservative town, or like a place where they had like one black kid at their school, they are like being overly cautious.
Right.
But in turn, they're actually incorrect sometimes, you know?
I grew up in a mixed environment with a lot of different, in Texas, you have a lot of white people, a lot of black people, and a lot of Mexicans. And that's what it is. So you grew up in that, and there wasn't like a direct way that was taught, but I think you hear it all the time, and I think for the most part, when I hear that and I heard it growing up, it always came off as like, you're just really trying to be politically correct. Even if you're not, if it's maybe not, directly taught that way. So I think it's a combination of, really trying to find that political correctness. But, I think when you talk to different people, there's whether you identify with your background, and different black people, you identify with your background that has African roots, or some people identify less with it and would rather just be called black. I mean, it's a conversation, definitely, but I think it was kind of all over the place growing up.
I know my parents were like trying to, like they were initially teaching me the same thing, and they had definitely heard it from like whatever like news organization they were watching, for like CNN or something. And I didn't even understand that might be wrong until I got to like high school, and I just had like more friends, period, who would just be like willing to tell me like, yeah, I guess it's technically correct, but like there's also like the black identity that like is more of like a bigger kind of separated thing.
Right. Like it's more of like an umbrella term.
Yeah.
And there's things under that, like, some people could be like Afro Latino, they could be Afro Asian, or there's a lot of black people in England. They're not African American, they're black, like black British or whatever. So yeah, that's so true. Callie?
Yeah, I agree that I feel like a lot of times it's just wanting to be like polite or wanting to be correct. And then I also think that like white people a lot of times say like they're colorblind or like they don't see race. And so saying the word black makes them feel like they're focusing too much on race or whatever. They think they're being like correct, when African American can only apply to like a certain amount of black people. Like not all black people are African American.
Right.
So,
like I think some white people think it's like a dirty word, and it's like, no, like that's who I am. Yeah.
I mean, I have no problem saying like either. It's kind of like the two words are equal for me. So it's kind of like I rarely say African American just because like it's more of it's not annoying to say, but like it's like more of a word to say. But I don't know, like being called white is white and like black is black. Some people take offense to it, but that's kind of like personal opinion. It's not something like I give too much thought. Like it's not like honestly African American and like black, like I don't even use those words like in a day-to-day sentence, because like you have to be like on a topic of like racism or like just history, like, so it's kind of, I don't know, it's not something I even.
Do you believe white privilege exists?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It every day. It's depending on what it is for me. I mean, it's like the town that I grew up in. Yeah, it's small and it's sheltered, but at the same time, I have probably 5 times the opportunity as someone who was born 30 minutes north of me in Boston. In like in the shitty areas of that, it's like you can't. It's really weird, just that time difference and that environment they grow up in, and the people I see here who grow up this way, how they change, just because of their skin color or the area that they've grown up in, and especially with like police and everything like that. I don't have to worry about it. I the other day blew past the cop going at least 100. Did I get stopped? Absolutely not. It's like it, and the times I have gotten stopped, they don't care. It is
Yeah,
weird.
I'll go. Yeah, white privilege definitely exists. I've seen it in different contexts. Obviously, I just mentioned like my background in Brazil. So to that point, like it exists there too. It exists everywhere. The numbers and just they're pretty stagnant as far as executives. Like how many black executives do we see in major corporations across the country? I mean, it's so simple. It's so simple to look at and to ignore that and say there's no white privilege. You're just hiding from the facts.
Right, right. And I want to, before I let Nicole and Matt speak, I reached out to so many like white people for this conversation, and it's funny how you guys said yes, and I appreciate that, but a lot of white people were like, especially like from high school that I used to argue with and get into like big debates at the lunch table. A lot of them said no, or like they felt uncomfortable, or like thank you for having this conversation, but like I'm not interested. And I was like, huh? Like you're the type of person, because all the people that said no, those are the people that I wanted to speak to, because I feel like we always hear from like the quote unquote good white people, and it's the people that like I usually try to stay away from. I don't follow on Instagram. I don't interact with on a daily basis. Those are the people that I have to talk to, because if I just keep talking to like people like you guys, I feel like sometimes the conversation kind of just stops there, but it's gonna take me talking to a Trump supporter or someone who is racist for me to change to really change stuff in society. But yeah, I'm gonna let you guys speak. Nicole.
I do love that you want to bridge that gap because that's great. I also love getting in fun arguments with Trump supporters. It's a fun side hobby of mine. But like white privilege, I see it almost every single time my best friend Nani and I hang out. Like the way that she gets treated differently than me, especially in high school where we met, teachers would treat us differently. And that would get on my nerves. And me, even though I'm 5 foot, I still would slap a bitch if they try to disrespect her, because it's like literally so.
Yes. No, that's important.
It was so infuriating because it's like she's still a person. She still has thoughts that are so valid and that need to be heard. Like just because of my skin color, like whoever's skin color does not make them less valid. Like it,
Yes,
it is.
yes. And it's gonna take you. It's like it's one thing for like us as Black people to like march and protest and post and like be angry or whatever, but it's gonna take you guys talking to that racist uncle, that problematic cousin, for things to really change. Because I think sometimes when things come out of your mouths, people hear it different. What's his name? He played the Joker in that last Joaquin Phoenix. He had like a speech that was like like basically like racism is bad or whatever, and like we need diversity, and everybody was like, oh my god, he's so awesome, he's so woke. And it's like, but I'll say it, or a activist will say it, like Tamika Mallory or somebody, oh, she's so angry, oh, they need to shut up the Blacks, oh my god. And it's like, that's not fair. So when a white man is like kind of woke or whatever, everyone loves him. But when Black people are speaking about our own experiences, it's like, oh, like shut up, like we don't care. It's like weird. So that's why this conversation was so important. And I totally agree with what you said.
I remember being in elementary school and noticing that I wasn't punished as much as kids for doing the same exact thing. I remember noticing that like I had different things in some kids, and some kids were just, I mean, it's actually a thing that Black girls in schools are punished. I forget what the percentage is, but it's like something percent more than any other kid. Like than white girls, than Black boys, than white boys. Like there's something about Black women that I don't know why they get the worst of it.
One of the things that I also started to notice once I started learning about like what white privilege actually was that it's not always like an addition to normal life, but sometimes it's like a lack of roadblocks, that sort of thing. Um, I've already written down a few examples just because I'm kind of airheaded sometimes. But I also wanted to go off of what you guys were just talking about as well. Because I used to like be big into watching all of those. I think they're called like debate bros now,
Okay.
on like YouTube and all that thing. And I was always like, oh yeah, but am I allowed to curse? I don't want to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
No,
I'm like,
it's
oh
fine.
yeah, fuck those racist assholes, classist bitches. But like at the same time, looking back, I'm like, well, we're also kind of like giving them a platform that maybe they don't really deserve. Well, they don't deserve, but so like I'm always like trying to weigh the, is it possible for me to like get through to this person and be like, hey, maybe that's, you know, a terrible way of thinking, or am I just going to talk to them and then use the people that look at me to look at them as well and broaden their own audience? But also, you know,
Right.
I'm not like too famous, too popular, so it's not like the
Right.
biggest, the most difficult thing. If I fail, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
But yeah, definitely something I think about.
I totally agree with that. And I think the point that you made about like all of the people who like really you wanted to have the conversations with and have like these tough discussions with are the ones that said no or said they were uncomfortable or denied it. And I don't know. I feel like if we're not educating people from like forcing them to take like a critical race theory class, some people are just never going to be like immersed in these conversations. Some people are just going to like take the same classes that they're taking, never take like a sociology class or learn about any of this, never watch this podcast because they're not like forced to. And I think that's so like, I don't even know what you can do about it, because some people just like will not recognize their white privilege at all, and you give them examples and they still just don't get it.
Right.
And so it's like
what
I don't know.
like what can I do, you know?
Right, I don't know.
Yeah, you can continue.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know how to explain to you that like every single thing that you do every single day is like based on your white privilege. Like the way you move through the world is correlated with your white privilege. Like the media that you see, all the like pretty white people that you see on screen, like that is all culmination of like racism and white privilege. And I don't know how to explain to people that their entire existence is based upon this, you know?
That's so true. That's so true. Cause it's like, I didn't want to force people to come on. Cause like, you know, I'm not paying you guys. Like it is not CNN or whatever. And I also don't want to force people to do something they don't want to do. But it's like, damn, like those are the people that I wanted to argue with and like try to pick their brain and, you know, but you know, hopefully when this episode comes out, like somebody who's like not like you guys will like listen and like, oh, I didn't know that, or like, oh, I'm not gonna do that next time. If that's just one person, I feel like maybe then it's like, okay, this episode worked, like, you know, it did its purpose. Felipe.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, being able to reach that part of the audience, that's important. And you get a couple, then that makes a big difference because they're surrounded by people that think the same way as they do. But just to the earlier point of, you know, when a black person goes out and says what Joaquin Phoenix says, and it's like, oh, they're angry, and otherwise, like a white person says that they're praised. I think that's just part of, you know, it's we kind of that we act as if that solved the problem, right? Like if black people do it, they're angry, it's like they're complaining. But if white people do, yeah, we'll praise, you know, a white person that does it because, all right, it's like all of a sudden we don't have to act anymore because they stood for us, and like this supposedly that solved the problem, even though it didn't really do anything. It just kind of enlightened some people maybe. I think we like that, you know, like white people, like just cultural, like society, we like when somebody else, like a white person or a white person of any culture, of any ethnicity, takes that stance, and it's like, okay, cool, like they solved the problem for me. Yeah, that's a very cool thing that they did, and now we don't have to do anything. And I think that's like part of like the reason that they are praised for that, while like black people aren't, because obviously we've seen black people take action, and that is just negative. It's like frowned upon a lot of times. So I think I just want to add that little bit in there.
I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, that's important. I think, yeah, like, oh, they did it, so like we don't have to do the work anymore. It's like kind of like lazy wokeness or whatever. But that's so true.
It definitely changes like where you live, where you're from. So like I don't want to get too like like finite with like examples here, but if you go to like a richer community or somewhere where people make more money, those kids definitely have better education. They're just set up better. Their parents set them up better. So like if your parents are rich, it's a lot easier to go through life if you have access to a bank account or you hold stocks from the time you're born. So yeah, white privilege definitely exists. It's kind of just the the result of like history and like kind of like the ladder coming all the way down to now, which is like unfortunate because it's not always everyone starts from zero, because there's plenty of kids, and I'm sure you've met plenty of them in your life, that like some kids are just set up and it's just like their parents pay for school, they pay for everything, their car, and it's just no responsibility, no nothing. And it's so unfortunate. It's just like obviously because not no person has control over like what they're born into and what skin color they are, but like it's like as a white man, like I definitely have more privilege than like the next like black man, or like it's because it just sucks. Like that's just the way the world is. Like obviously, depending on where you are in the world, that kind of changes or gets worse. But yeah, it's unfortunate. So yeah, I definitely have white privilege by definition, and I've experienced it. I've seen it firsthand, and it's like it's unfair, but there's nothing one person can do to fix it. It has to all be like a group.
Does Black Lives Matter bother you?
It shouldn't. If it bothers you, you are the problem. Like that's the only answer. Like it sorry, but like black people, sorry, I probably have no like authority to say this, but like black people have been like held down for so many years that they deserve to have a platform and be heard and actually be able to bridge that gap. Because it's there. It's like basically saying that the wage gap doesn't exist or climate change doesn't exist. It's there. Like, and we just need to take steps slowly but surely to bridge it. And yeah, but at the end of the day, if Black Lives Matter, if that phrase bothers you, you're the problem.
Right. It's not Black Lives Better, it's Black Lives Matter. Like, you know, it's simple. It's like basic. I don't know why people get so angry like on Twitter or Instagram, but I totally agree with you. Felipe?
Yeah, I mean the being opposed to the phrase is actually hilarious, right? Because people say like all lives matter. It's like, all right, cool, but like if I have like I don't know, right, like 3 water bottles or something, and like one of them has a hole, like I'm gonna take care of the one that has a hole, right? Like so that's the one that matters right now, right? Like the other one's not that they don't matter, but like yeah, all lives matter. That's not the point, because you know it's so the phrase itself, you know, I don't understand why it would bother anybody. Now I think a reason of why people get and I think that's me like being exposed to different types of people who think differently. They're opposed to, let's say, like Black Lives Matter, not as a phrase, but as an organization that is let's say I want to say a weapon, like a form, something that the Democratic Party uses to kind of sway Democrats, and that's like way too like philosophical for me.
Right.
But when you break away, like, right, just the phrase, and then you start talking about, oh, I don't agree with like the principles and how they're approaching all of this, and like I said, it's too philosophical for me. That's a conversation that like I want to have with somebody like that, because all right, okay, like what is Black Lives Matter as an organization doing to that you disagree with? And it's not necessarily the phrase they disagree with, which I've learned. It's more so like how they attack different, principles and different, governmental systems. And I think that's a conversation we should have. So I think a lot of times when people are opposed to Black Lives Matter, it's not necessarily the phrase. When they're opposed to the phrase, I think you're an idiot straight up. But there's the different side of it as well.
Right. Like because it is an organization, it's a phrase, but it's also like an organization, I believe nonprofit.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's like I remember one of the founders, I forgot her name, but she I think she bought like a really nice house in California or whatever, and she has like many houses, and people I remember like were kind of mad about that a couple months ago. And I'm like, well, if she works hard, she's out there in the streets, she's an activist. She doesn't like, I don't want her to be broke, and I feel like if what's wrong with, but it also goes in the question of like capitalism and like the billionaires, millionaires, whatever. But I think it's okay for her to have more than one house and to live comfortably and more than comfortably. I think that's okay. Um, but I don't really see the problem with that. Now, if she's using the money to like do something like wrong with that money and like aiding something else, then that's like kind of like Chick-fil-A. I feel like that's a problem. But if she's rich, why are you guys mad at that? Like I never said that. But yeah, that's a good conversation to have. Like is it okay? I guess maybe the question is like, is it okay? How should they handle their money? How should it be distributed? I get what you're trying to say. Yeah.
And yeah, just bouncing off that real quick. Yeah, like there the organization itself has ties to different principles, whether it is against capitalism and stuff like that. And if I'm a very pro-capitalist person and I have friends who are extremely like fiscally conservative and stuff like that, then they're going to be like, oh, I don't support what they're doing. But it doesn't necessarily mean they disagree with the foundational principles of race within that, right? So it's a lot deeper than the phrase. But I think when the whole Black Lives Matter movement really made in like a year ago, right, when this was a whole thing, I think there was racist people and just racism in general flew out, because why are you saying Blue Lives Matter? Nobody cares about, like, we're not talking about that.
Right.
So the phrase. I mean, I don't think there's any debate in the phrase. If it bothers you, then you're racist, in my opinion, right? Like,
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Callie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the right wing is so based on fear, and I feel like a lot of times when white people hear Black Lives Matter, they just like immediately get scared that we're going to go to, like a Black Panthers, like more militarized, like, I feel like the right always has these like buzzwords, and when they hear them, they just immediately like forget all logic, like Black Lives Matter or like social, like critical race theory. Like it just sparks so much fear that they don't even know, like, the organization, they don't even know the founders. I mean, the entire myth about I think it was Patrisse Cullors, I think that was the co-founder of Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
We're really mad at her, and it's like, okay, you're all about like capitalism and building yourself up and like making it to the top until it's a Black woman who does it, and then you get upset. It's just interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, because it's like, why is it that other, like, when white people become rich, it's like oh, like, that's success, like, listen to them, they're awesome or whatever. Kylie Jenner being first self-made billionaire, like, everybody was so happy about that. So why is it that when a Black woman or Black person gets a lot of money, oh, he didn't earn it, or like he's like, it's like they troll them, and it's like, that's not fair. Black Lives Matter is a global organization. I'm sure they get a lot of donations. I've donated to them. And do I know the ins and outs of like who they're tied with, where they put their money? I don't. I should educate myself. But like, if you have a problem with the basic fundamental of what they're doing, like Felipe said, like, something's wrong with you, like, you might be racist. So there's nothing, the organization and the phrase are two different things, for sure.
But it's also like, the reason Black Lives Matter is a movement is because historically Black lives haven't mattered. When people say all lives matter, we've seen time after time that Black lives don't. So that's why we have this movement. Like, I just totally support it, because right now Black lives don't matter. You're not going to advocate for someone. Like, it's like, white men, you already matter. Our system is formed around you for you. You are the standard. You know what I mean? You're as high as you get.
I wouldn't say either one of them bother me. It only bothers me because of like what it's turned into, and like in Black Lives Matter, coming up from George Floyd, that was like a huge like accelerated, because it didn't just start like last year, but in doing that, it almost like segregates people even more, which is kind of like counterintuitive. Obviously, that's not the point, but like everyone else that doesn't have a problem or they've never experienced racism, they look at that movement like, you know, who are they to like try to think that they have an issue and like we don't. Like everyone has issues, which like obviously I think the movement is great. It's something that just can't come and go. It has to constantly be consistent.
Did the murder of George Floyd last summer change your perspective at all about racism and race in America?
I would say it didn't change my perspective just because I already had that one.
I mean, obviously things happen like locally, just unfortunately, but something like that where it's like so broad, and then to see it get stretched out for so long, trying to like kind of say it wasn't what it was, or it was something different than like what everyone saw, is just all good. There's some bad, and all bad there's some good. So like in that happening, it kind of shed some light. And obviously, like I said before, it was like a huge kickstart to like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which is great. But along with that, it comes with like, oh, white lives matter, all lives matter, blue lives matter. Now like red lives matter. I think it was a huge eye opener. Unfortunately, like that one event isn't going to do what it needs to do, like for everyone and for all time, just because like that just doesn't happen. I was glad to see like getting the attention it deserved, but like it also shed some light that like things aren't in the news that need to be in the news, and depending on what channel you watch kind of like changes your perception on like what you think about certain topics, which also sucks. That's why I said do your own research.
I'm gonna say yes and no. No, because now it's filmed. Like now there's video proof. But like, yes, of how many people came out of the woodwork and we're like, this is not okay. It's like the good white people trying to be like, oh my God, we need to fix this. It's like, no shit, Sherlock. Like, oh my God, you know? It was just like the amount of people that just like came up and were like, oh my God, this needs to change. It's like, yeah, have you been living under a rock? Like, look at the news. Like any news source, regardless, of course, every news source is biased. They say that they're not, but they really are. And like, look, broaden your horizons, look at all of them, and you could see this is not the first time. Not the first. Now you just have video proof, which is awesome. Finally, that there's now visual proof. No one can be like, oh no, that didn't happen. This is what actually happened. No, you have physical proof. No one can move it, like change it in any way, shape, or form. I love like concrete evidence. I'm like, look.
Yeah. No, so, like, yeah, that's so true. Because back then they didn't have like camera phones, so like you couldn't record the police brutality that happened. So I'm sure it's probably easier for certain people to be like, oh, like what are you talking about? Like it's not that serious. Like where's the evidence? Where's the proof? You know? And it's like no, like and you can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like even the cops that have like the body cameras on, like they manipulate that. They're like, oop, they just turn it off.
Like there's a code of blue, you know, like they protect each other.
Like Nicole said, like yes and no. Like obviously we already knew kind of like the basics. We were already in it. We were already for Black Lives Matter, for the movement. And then I think like leading up to George Floyd also was like a tumultuous time because of Ahmaud. That was like a few weeks before George Floyd, and Breonna was a little bit before that. And so I think there had been like a lot of tension, I remember, going up to that kind of was starting to change perspectives. And I think, so I lived like 30 minutes away from where he was murdered. So that definitely like, I mean, like Minnesota was just a different place during that time, especially Minneapolis. And like being there, you could really feel a really eerie sense of like tension and all of that. And I think that's something that the community still holds. So that has still kind of like swayed my perspective on Minneapolis as a city in general. But then also I think my perspective has changed in specific like policies and like specific situations. So like before I wasn't like really sure on my view of rioting or my view of like gun control. And now that there has been a lot more education since last summer, I feel like I've complexified and like deepened my perspective, but it hasn't really changed.
Okay. Yeah, I think because yeah, we always knew about Black Lives Matter and we always knew about police brutality. You know, like Trayvon Martin. I think I was in middle school when that happened, or Rodney King in the '90s. Like my parents remember that they seeing that on TV. So it's been a police brutality has always been around, and even go back hundreds and hundreds of years. But I think this was just like we were all home, because of COVID, and we're all watching TV. So it's like, oh wow, like you can't deny it, like what just happened. So that's really true. Felipe?
Yeah, I'll just echo what was said. I don't think, yeah, my perspective didn't change. I can see how America's perspective changed because, like what you just said, everybody was stuck at home watching. You're forced to watch it, but I think a lot of people just ignored it before. I mean, Michael Brown that was a huge thing, right? Everybody knew about what was
Yeah.
going on in Ferguson. Everybody saw Eric Gardner like get choked out, right, in New York City. Like everybody saw that. That was all over the news. So I don't think, if our perspective changed, it's because everyone was brought to act out against it. And I think the perspective that changed was more so like what we can do if we all like come together. But as far as our perspective changing on America and like racism, I don't think so, because we've been seeing that going on. Personally, my best friend growing up, well, one of my best friends growing up, played football with them. His cousin was shot, right? Like in high school.
Wow.
So, and we played football with him. He was 2 years older than us. So it's something that you see all around. And even if it didn't happen personally with you, you saw it on TV. And Black Lives Matter was already going on. I'm a big music fan, and J. Cole, I'm one of my favorite artists, but he dropped Be Free after Michael Brown, right? And like, if you didn't want to listen to that, you didn't have to listen to that. But I think we were all aware that this was a problem already. But because we were forced to stay at home, I think our perspective on like we're all aware of it. I think that changed a little bit.
For sure. For sure. Matt?
Honestly, I'd say hard, yeah. My perspective absolutely changed. Before before it was kind of like, oh, this is really bad. We should definitely do stuff to change it. And then I really don't like to say it, but like I wasn't doing anything. Like I was trying to be there for my non-white friends, of course, but like past that, I wasn't like doing anything. I wasn't looking into anything. I didn't know anything,
Right.
other than what they would tell me. But when George Floyd was murdered, there was so much like more ease of information. Like I could find so much more. There were so many more sources just like so readily not apparent
Like
presented,
available.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was learning about like the two-party system, and like what their responses were to this happening. The Democrats doing a lot to like pacify and neutralize like all of the really radical air quotes slogans and stuff. Like in Colorado, they got rid of qualified immunity, which totally awesome. But like they've really only done it there and like one or two other states so far, and it has been snail pace. And then there's all of these liberals that never really like look into the heart of problems, that take all of these big slogans like ACAB and nope, that's the only one that I'm going to be able to remember right now. If you guys remember any, you want to like let me help me out here. They would like, oh, we don't mean this person, we mean this, and it's like, well, that's more of a personal decision about like what you do mean by these. And then on the right, it was just like, that never happened. They were in the wrong place. They did the wrong thing. You should have complied. All that like venomous shit. And it's like, they are obviously doing different things, but like the ends aren't really changing. And like, as I started to like become more aware of that, it was just like, yeah, wow, I was dumb as hell before, and now I know a lot more information.
I was just gonna say that was a really good point that you brought up, Matthew, about like the commodification of ACAB and like different little lingo. I can't think of any right now either, but like I think that my perspective definitely changed on that, because before last summer, I think I would definitely be more in that boat where I would say ACAB, but not exactly know what it meant, or be like, well, I don't know if we should abolish the police. Maybe we should like reform it. Yeah, eat the rich, exactly. And I think being in like quarantine and having to sit there by myself and like sit in that uncomfortableness and think about what these phrases actually mean, and if I'm actually living up to them, or if I'm just using them as like an aesthetic or as like a fun thing to say, but I don't actually believe in them. That definitely changed my perspective. Yeah, I thought that was a good point.
Yeah,
It's funny.
I was gonna ask you, and I hope you don't like get offended by this, but as someone who's like in a fraternity, and like that typical like white frat, that stereotype, I guess, that people how do you have you had to have like difficult conversations with like people in fraternities in your fraternity? Has that like happened?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't get offended. I actually love that question. Part of the reason um I got into, well, I was very hesitant at first
Okay.
because of the stereotypes. I played football growing up, and that was like I had a lot of like brothers growing up, and I think that was something that I wanted to get into. And once I got into it, I think you clearly see the stereotype in so many different fraternities and people who deny it. Like, I mean, it's obvious. You see them walking around school like,
Yeah.
um, but there's different, I would say, like different fraternities are different. Fraternity I was in was very diverse, I would say. And because of that, which is maybe even a negative, there wasn't a lot of those conversations because we had Black people, we had
Okay.
Muslims. So I think, and that goes back to my earlier point where it's like maybe problems aren't addressed because Obama is president, where they will be addressed because Trump is president, because now they're like front and
Mm,
center. Um,
okay.
so within my fraternity, I don't. There weren't conversations like that in particular, and sometimes there would be, but you'd have to be in a side room with somebody who maybe tends you can tell somebody's kind of leans one way and might have racist tendencies, and I have had those conversations, and it's one of those things where it's like, all right, you got to try to be soft and talk to them, find out what the problem is, because you just yelling at them isn't going to solve anything, right? They're not going to understand why you're going at it.
Right.
Uh, but I do think it's a problem that is within Greek life as a whole. But because in my fraternity in particular, and then my close friends within my fraternity, right now I live with two of my friends, and both brown. And they were both my fraternity. So I think less conversations happen because of that. But
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
problem. I would say that.
Okay, yeah. Because I feel like we always hear that, like, oh, like the fraternities, like white guy, that culture, like, oh, they're racist, they're problematic. So I wondered, like, oh, like you don't give off that energy, and I wonder, like, if you had to have like those conversations. But no, yeah, that definitely answered the question. And we just have to, like, I had to work on that because I think when Trump became president, I was like arguing, cursing people out all the time in high school, and I didn't really care about white tears and like white people's feelings. I didn't really care because I just felt like that's wrong. Like, why are you saying those things? And I think the senior year, that was like junior year, senior year, I kind of calmed down and was kind of like, okay, like I'm just gonna not be so angry. But yeah, you don't get anywhere by arguing. It's hard though because it's like as soon as I hear something dumb, I just want to like attack. Like I just want to, but I struggle with that because it's like, should I raise my voice? Like maybe then they'll listen. But yeah, like have a conversation because I think then you can really understand where someone's coming from for sure. Callie, did you want to add something?
I agree with that. But I also think that like white people cannot be coddled when they're learning about racism, especially when you're like older. Um, and like obviously arguing, yelling isn't super helpful, but I feel like being more stern when you're like a white person talking to another person, a white person, about racism, being like very blunt and honest and stern, I feel like has been the best solution, because they don't really have any like argument against that. Like the only way that I was able to understand a lot of different concepts was because I wasn't like coddled into it. It was like for example, reparations. When I first started following like Black Lives Matter, when I was like a young teen, I didn't understand the concept of reparations. I was like, why should I be giving out my money or what? I just didn't understand it. And I had to be like talked very sternly to, and like kind of in a mean way, to understand what that concept is. So and then also I was gonna say, I am in a sorority too, and I think it's definitely more common in some sororities than others to be more open about your political beliefs. Like my sorority is very, I feel like, open. Like during recruitment, we're allowed to talk about it, you know, like we're definitely allowed to like suss out whether what someone's beliefs are, because if they don't hold the same values that we do, then, but it's definitely different between different sororities and fraternities, whether there's like rules about it. Some are just more open than others, but
do you say the N-word, and do your Black friends let you say it?
When I was young and playing football and track, I said the N-word, like, you know, and I said it like all the time with my friends. And to that point, Black friends, I ran track. I was the only white person on my team. It felt natural to me, right? And I think to that point, me growing up and like when I started getting more educated and like throughout late middle school and high school, like that's when like I stopped, because I'm like, I started hanging around more like white people, and I started seeing like where the word was bad, right? I never knew the word as a bad word. And so from that perspective and like growing through that, I stopped and I never used it again because I saw how it could be manipulated. So it's a conversation, such a conversation to have, especially with how prevalent it is in music and the music that I listen to. And so many different ways where it can be used. It's an interesting conversation. Was there a second part to the question?
Yes. So you said the N-word, your Black friends like gave you permission. You think that's what it was?
So I was really young. I was like 9, 10, 11 when I was using it, and just like saying it in general. So it wasn't even a permission thing. It was like we were saying it to each other, like we were hanging out. And my coaches were Black and they were letting it slide. Like it was literally like it was in conversation. I never had a white coach growing up. Like, so it's so different, and it's an experience I feel like a lot of people don't have, because I feel like, oh, like you talk about I have the N-word pass, right? There wasn't a really pass, because I was just I was entrenched in the community, in this community that I was in, that was just happening. And then when I moved on, and aside from that, like through school, and then I realized like it became so much more. It became so much more complex than that. It wasn't just like I'm just hanging with friends. Like now it's like there's multiple, meanings to this word. And then I'm like, you know what? I realized like not everybody now is like there's this past thing. It's like, what's the past? I don't even want to deal with that. And then a second thing is like, you're wrong. Just because somebody is okay with you saying it doesn't mean anybody else is okay with you saying it.
Right, exactly.
It just became like a whole different thing, very complex. But yeah, like long story, but that's that.
No, yeah, thank you for keeping it real. That's honest. That's very honest. I know. I remember in high school, like some kid, he was like, "Oh, if I make this free throw, will you let me say the N-word?" And I was like, "What? Like, that's crazy." It was my high school was different, but I'm glad you kept it honest. I think a lot of times, what I've noticed is that like a lot of in lower income neighborhoods, Hispanic people and Black people grow up together. So it's like a lot of Hispanic people who aren't like Afro Latino, like they're just, Hispanic, they say the N-word. And it's like, in the South Bronx, that might be okay, but you might go to Miami or LA, or you just leave the Bronx and then you might get slapped, punched in the face, because like you said, not every Black person is okay with that.
I actually had a conversation like this the other day with my father. He grew up saying it because he's, oh God, how old is he? He's 60 something. I'm so sorry. I don't know my father's age, but, and like, that's what he grew up with. And so it's constantly of like hey, don't. Like, it might have been okay then, but now, no. And like the term, like, having a past, I personally don't believe in that, because it's like you didn't go from that lineage of the abuse and everything that a lot of Black people have, suffered from, and the 400 years and all of that. It's like you don't have that past. Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree with everything Nicole said. White people, we are so entitled. It's insane that like one thing that's like is super disrespectful to Black people, and they're just like, can you just not say it? And then white people are like, why not? It's just so insane that like there shouldn't even be any other like explanation. It should just be like, this is super disrespectful towards Black people, don't say it, period. That's it. Like, it's not your word to reclaim, so how are you even going to try to reclaim it or use it? It's so easy. That's why I don't get like when celebrities are caught saying it and they apologize. If that word is not part of your vocabulary, you're not going to say it. Like, I have not said that word since I was like a child, and it's not part of my vocabulary, and so I don't say it, and I don't say it in songs because I've never said it in songs. It's just like, I feel like if you don't say it, it's not hard to get tripped up and have an accident. Like,
Exactly.
it's baffling. It is baffling.
So I have like one instance in my memory where I did say it. And like, I'm gonna add context, but of course it doesn't, absolve me. I want to say I was in like middle school alone with one of my other white friends, and he was like, come on, just do it. No one's here. It doesn't matter. No one's ever gonna find out. And I was like super uncomfortable, but I did like get peer pressured into doing it. And like afterwards I was like, man, that just felt fucking gross. Like, it's not me. I'm not allowed, I guess. I shouldn't. And like looking back, that is embarrassing. Like, every time I think about it, I'm like, man, why'd you let yourself get pulled into that? No reason. And I'm not gonna name drop them because I don't know how their friends would feel about it, but I do have one friend who they like to call it like their tests or whatever, and they're like, come on, just say it. It's only us. It's just us two. Come on, just go ahead. I'm like, no. And she's like, a Black friend, not a white friend. She's like totally messing with me. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. She's like, you passed the test. And I was like, why do we do this all the time?
No, that's not okay. That's not okay. It's not your word to say, and I just don't understand why. Like Callie said, I think a lot of white people are entitled. I think some Black people have this idea that like, if we can say it, why can't they? But I think that's dumb, because it's like that word was used to like further enslave and like dehumanize slaves, like enslaved African people. And it's like sometimes that's the last word that they heard before they died, or before they got whipped, or whatever the case, or raped, or whatever the case was. So I just think that it's very like, if white people know that and they understand that, why would you even want to say that word? Even if your Black friend says, oh yeah, you could say it, Felipe, oh you could say it, Nicole, Callie, Matt, like it's fine, like I'm okay, it's just us. Like, no, that's very problematic. And I don't and I think also it's like, oh, but it's in a song though. Okay, that's a Black person singing or rapping, you're not Black, you're not rapping, so so yeah.
I remember like whispering it to a song when I in 4th grade. I was like, you know what, I used to say, like, when I was a child in elementary school, I would say, you know what, I'm singing a song. I know the historical significance of this word. I support, my Black friends, my community and whatever. And I'm not saying it. I'm just singing along to the lyrics. So that's what I would say. And then like probably a year later, I was like, what the fuck was that? I get so upset when people say it, if you're white, or if I don't know, you're like a white Latino. That's not your word. That's not your history. You know, it's so mind baffling to me. I had
Yeah, so I think that obviously there's like two different connotations. There's like it being like the really really racist term, like the hard ER, like that's like bad, like no one should ever say that. And then there's kind of just like the A at the end, like what's up, like how you doing, like so like
Right.
that's been like socially accepted. I don't think you can just go up to like some random guy and just be like, yo, what's up, like that doesn't work. So yeah, do like me and my friends say it, yeah, and like if you're a friend, like you kind of almost have to like ask for permission because it's such like a sensitive word nowadays.
Okay.
You know, I think like I said, it's something you have to like ask permission for and just kind of you can't say that, you can't just say it.
You know, I think we're all young. We're all, we all, especially, when you're younger and you hear rap music, and there is that small point when you're a kid and you're like, I don't realize that this word is bad, and you just think of it as any other swear word, but then it's like, no, because you got to treat it with respect of the fact that it's a swear word, but it has so much deeper meaning than any other swear word, or any other word really. Just the sheer magnitude that it holds. You can't say that we deserve to use it really, and it's funny when because I have heard plenty of white people say, sing, but they're like, oh, I'm just singing the lyrics. Yeah, but did you write the lyrics? Did you?
Have you ever appropriated someone's culture? And do you understand what culture appropriation is?
It definitely was when I was like younger and I didn't realize it until someone was like, hey, don't do that. I was like, makes sense, my dude. It was a hula class and I love, like, hi, I'm a dancer. I love learning different dance styles. It like makes my heart happy. And so after that one class, that does not make me an expert at all. But I was like, look, guys, look at what I can do. My hips can move. Like, and was it correct in any way, shape, or form? No. And my friends were like, Nicole, that's not correct. Like, this is a saying, like, they're saying things with dance. And I was like,
Exactly.
light bulb. And I was like,
It's someone's culture.
yeah.
And you can't, like, it's not a Halloween costume. Like, you can, if you want to dress up as, like, I don't know, Moana, you don't have to like tan your skin. You could just put on the outfit, or like, I don't know, you want to be Michael Jackson. You don't have to darken your skin, like blackface, yeah, you don't have to do that. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I definitely have like an old dream catcher that I'd be more than 100% certain is not from an indigenous creator. I feel like it's more than likely that I've done more just from like, I live in like I'm not gonna say that people would be upset with me. I live in like a pretty not rich but like well off place in Jersey, and like I'm sure I have, but like I can't remember anything else right now. I've definitely like, once I realized that was like not it, I was like, oh well, what can I do with it? Because I was like, I don't want to throw it out because I feel like that's also disrespectful, but I don't want to keep using it because that feels disrespectful. Can I give it to someone? But it's not made by an indigenous creator. So like, is that kind of like there's like a bunch of different like cultures around like etiquette, and like, is that rude? Is that also? And I'm like not sure what to do with it. I've talked to a few indigenous people about it, especially the tribe that does it. I don't remember their names or the tribe's name, unfortunately. And they were like, just hold on to it, maybe donate to someone that makes dream catchers. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll look for one. And I now that I'm saying, I definitely forgot to do that, so I'll probably do that after this. Gotta go find one again. But yeah, now I don't really like use it because it feels weird. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, and I think yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, being that I'm not indigenous, it's kind of like hard for me to like speak on that.
Sure.
But I think it's just being mindful of like what you wear and like what you put on. Like a lot of people like to wear like sombreros, and And I remember I got really nervous because we went to me and my family went to like a Mexican restaurant for my mom's birthday. And as tradition in like that restaurant, they put like a they give you like a cake and candles and put a sombrero on you. And I was like, ooh, like I don't know, like she's Puerto Rican but not Mexican, like I don't know. But I feel like that's someone like inviting you in your culture. Like they put it
Yeah.
on her, she didn't put it on herself. So I feel like that's
Appreciation versus appropriation.
right.
No,
right.
just off that, I think it can be a gray area, right? Where you can say like anybody can say an excuse like, "Oh, I'm just like appreciating, like I just like this, and I'm gonna, appreciate this, and I'm giving appreciation towards this culture because I'm wearing this." And to, talking about fraternities, as you mentioned before, and like Greek life, you have these parties and you have themes, and let's say there's like a hip hop theme, and you I hope I don't see a white person in a do-rag, and that's clearly like appropriation, right? And it's clear. So I think it's finding how are you gonna like, you want to be mindful of it and you don't want to appropriate a culture, but it's almost as if like, you don't really want to touch that boundary. If you do, like, you want to make sure you understand. And I think it's just a part of us having staying educated and having that conversation all the time, and being invited to it, right, as you said.
Right.
Especially in like you being offered a sombrero in a Mexican themed whatever it is, and then you take that and that's you being grateful, but you walking around wherever and just acting like, all right, like let me just take this part of their culture and I don't care about anything else. Like I like tacos, but like fuck the rest. I don't
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much more to it.
And I think some people will like they'll take something and they'll like rename it and then try to profit off of it.
I am proudly saying I've never appropriated
Okay,
someone's culture because I'm acutely aware of it.
Right.
Cultural appropriation is, I know what cultural appropriation is.
Right.
And I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, where is the line between appreciation and appropriation? When is it that this culture is beautiful? I've learned about it. I'm embracing it. It's amazing. And I support people that are native to this culture, to I'm a Kardashian and I want cornrows.
White people created race, therefore they created racism. So what do you think the solution is to ending racism?
About racism is taught through and through. So I feel like to really start with like the root of the problem, which is the ideology of putting other people above others, is like teaching it. That's like
Right.
step number one, is teaching that one, it exists. Two, how to stop it from existing. And then like three, like advocates of like how can you do it in like everyday life. Like not everyone has the funds to be able to donate.
Right.
Like they do have the ability to form conversations and the ability to open your mind this much to just listen. Like
Right.
sometimes that's just the point of just listening to people's stories, looking it up. Like there's so many, like listening to your podcast, of like listening to just simply stories and educating yourself. And it's going to be long. Hopefully it happens before I move on, but it might not. But it's just a step closer. It's like baby steps.
Right. Right. And I think, yeah, listening, like you just said, having some compassion, and yeah, teaching it, like when you guys have kids one day, if you want kids, telling your children like, hey, like, treat everyone with respect and recognize your white privilege. Don't don't be racist and be anti-racist, because I think also sometimes white people are like, oh, like I'm good, like nothing's wrong with me, like why are you mad at me? And it's like, okay, but like I want you to educate like your family members, and also to what are you doing to like stand up for black, that's my next question, what are you doing to stand up for black people? And I'm not asking you to be an activist, you don't need to be out there in the streets like that, but just like, what are you doing in your everyday life? Like, how are you talking to your black friends? Are you saying the N word? Are you using your social media for good and not spreading false information? So yeah, that's so true.
I mean, I think education is the most important thing, and obviously, like people learn less and feel like they have to learn less the older they get. So baby steps, yeah, I agree with, because the 5-year-old kids now aren't going to be 20 until 15 years later, and when they start making decisions and stuff. So I definitely do think time, but I think that's like not necessarily worst case scenario, but that's something that's a given. I think with time, like, definitely, and we need to be instilling the principles right now that are gonna, in 15 years, we're gonna be seeing the fruits of it. But there's so many things right now that, like, us taking action, and that's within the legal system, and different principles within different systems, like the prison system, as we mentioned before. So education one, and then obviously taking action, which is so cliche, but that's within opportunities in corporate America, and in sports, and in how we talk about different things. And like, with the Olympics right now, like, obviously, like, the whole Simone Biles thing is a whole thing, and you just see how divided people are on that. That's just having a conversation and understanding.
Yes.
And but it's so much to it. I do think baby steps is gonna happen, but I think we shouldn't rely on that. We need to, like, move now. So
No, yeah. And even like Shakari Richardson,
yeah,
and like
no
not
question.
yeah.
And
Not
and
being
and with Shakari's from Dallas, real close to me, and so that one even hit home even more. But that it's just, you see it every day in athletics. And the reason I think athletics is a good picture is because we're all it's pop culture, really. And it's so diverse in it, right? And so we see so much of this stuff out there. But yeah, that's a great example.
no. How do you stand up for Black people and people of color?
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in here. Um, ooh, that's such a
Mm,
good point.
yes.
We gotta move past the, like, oh my god, big word, my brain. Um, my brain was like, big word, can't read.
Sorry,
English is hard.
degeneracy. I was trying to add that on the last part, but we moved on, so I just typed it. Sorry about that.
I'm so sorry. My brain was just like, big word, check out, like, single brain cell. Like, let's not work today.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, as a white person, like, the most that you can't, like, of course I can get mad. I do the best that I possibly can, but, like, at the end of the day, it's the goal is to try to change people's minds. And that's what's so difficult, is because some of them don't want to change their minds. And it's just starting the conversation, getting it going, even if it is sharing those fun little infographics on your social media stories.
Yep.
But it's just educating in the way that you can, and educating yourself. If someone says, hey, that's not right, and being like, instead of being like, no, it is, it's correct, this is why it's correct, just look, see their side, and respond with, either if it's someone saying like, Trump should have won, you're like, okay, what makes you think that?
Right.
I love
How
your
did
face,
you come
like,
to that conclusion?
yeah, how did you come to that conclusion? Okay, let's build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's figure out how. Okay, you think Trump should have won. Okay, we're gonna agree to disagree on that point. But it's like certain things like that, of like, okay, let's hear the other side. And that's something that, especially the pandemic, made it so much more difficult to do. People wanted to close their minds, like, nobody's business. They're
Right.
like, especially with, like, being Republican, if someone says, oh yeah, I'm Republican, people are like, nope, don't want to talk to you, you're a horrible person, like, fuck you, leave. And it's like, let's listen to their side. As much as
Right.
it pains me, I will listen to their side, listen to their point. If all they say is Fox News, we need a little help here.
Right.
Let's try to find different areas. Let's get you to either you can watch Fox News, sure, but let's add some other like
Right.
news sources in there.
That
So
you
you get a
can get
well-rounded
your information from.
Exactly. And that's how it's how you can do it. It's just kind of like saying, hey, don't do that.
Exactly.
This is why.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I like that. And you, Matt?
Fully forgot that I was supposed to raise my hand, and I was like, I'll just wait. I'll just wait. I actually wanted to ask you to clarify. Are you looking for like specific instances or just kind of like passive stuff? Like stuff that you're always doing, always thinking about?
I'd say
I can
maybe like
do
either
both.
or. like either or, yeah.
Sure, fair enough. So I actually started thinking about it earlier in the recording. So like probably like an hour ago or so. I guess something that I can do for people of color, Black people, is like I can be mad all the time. I can just be consistently pissed off about it because like I have in my head that like I am able, like physically able to remove myself from it. So I'm not gonna get like worn out as fast as like a Black person would be with this because they have to like be listening and like figuring all this stuff out all the time. So like, oh, okay.
Sorry.
So like if I'm just pissed off about all of this like all this stuff that's just wrong, I'm able to like keep that going. I'll be angry all the time if I have to. It doesn't really take as much out of me as it would. But like if we're talking about more specific stuff, we have Cervantes. What's your major again? Because I don't want to like tell you stuff you already know.
I'm a TV production major.
Gotcha. So you don't have film history. So filmmaking and film studies and production majors, we take a class called film history.
Okay.
And part of that curriculum is seeing a clip from Birth of a Nation. Do we all know Birth of a Nation?
Yes, I've seen that.
I'll do a little snippet. It is a pro KKK movie where they are the heroes and Black people are the villains. And basically, it is the sole reason, if not one of the biggest reasons, why when it came out, the dying organization of the Ku Klux Klan had its strong resurgence. So personally, even though it is a big part of film history and it did do revolutionary things, these are things that I will admit, I don't think it is important for us to talk about it. I don't think we need to bring up this movie if we're learning about film history. If we need to learn about tactics or how media entwines itself with how people are with reality, then that should either be another class or it can be like a whole lesson. We can dedicate a day to that, but we don't have to dedicate a lesson to movies that only have horrible things in it. My thought process with it was like, oh, it did a revolutionary thing. Well, if it didn't exist, another movie would have done that same revolutionary thing. Doing something first just isn't that important, if I'm being honest. I don't care if someone does something first. If it gets done and it gets implemented, that's cool. That's good. Let's grow. Let's figure out new things. But to actually move past that, myself and honestly most of the class, we're talking to our professor about this. You know, like, hey, we don't want to see this movie. It's not teaching us anything, and we all know. And if we really need to talk about it, you don't have to show a snippet of it. Don't show it at all. We can just talk about it. Because believe it or not, this is a course that has prerequisites. So everyone already knows the terms. We can just talk about it. And he was interesting about it. His rebuttal was that it's like the censorship. It's like the Nazis burning books. And I was like, well,
I don't know
no,
about
it's
that.
not.
Yeah.
I sent him a strongly worded email about how like, hey, that's not the same thing, dude. I don't know what to tell you. But like in the moment, it was actually really nice to see the class come together and be like, hey, that's dumb as hell. Let's not do that. But
Right,
he
right.
was like kind of refusing to hear us. But you know, at least we were together. At least we were showing solidarity.
Right. And like you brought it up, you try to fight it. So I think that's important. And there's so many films that you can watch to learn about film history or whatever. Like you don't need
It's
to
ridiculous.
watch certain things or like dissect it like that. So I totally agree with you. My next question was have you had to educate your racist and or ignorant family members? Have you had to educate your racist and or ignorant family members?
I definitely have to like keep tabs on my uncle because he says some interesting things. Nothing that I can think of like specifically. He's just riding the Trump train. So like he'll say a bunch of garbage at like a family event, and I'll have to be like, hey, not to be a dick, but wrong, and did this way and this way and this way and this way.
Right.
And like it's kind of weird because like I'm not educating him because I know he's not listening to it. Because he's my uncle. He doesn't care about my opinion.
Right.
But like it's more so like I'm making sure my other family members aren't like being turned by like the conservative rhetoric, because like more often than not their rhetoric is pretty convincing, but like the things that they're talking about are simply just wrong and dumb. But yeah, that's kind of like most of what I do. He's not the only one though. Of course, like my parents, my brothers, even I'm sure I say some things that are definitely wrong. But like I try to watch them. I try to be gentle when I know that they're not being like malicious about it.
And a lot of it now is my brother too, because I know the environment that he's growing up in. I grew up in it. I know how easy it is to become ignorant, to become sheltered, to become, basically just, it isn't good. And I know the people that come out of here, I'm like, oh God. And I check him all the time. Yeah, sure. I'm a little brotherly mean to him every now and then. I'm like, hey, shut up. Listen, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't say that because it, and I think he has learned. He definitely holds his tongue around me, but whether he's applying it to the real world is up to him.
My last question for you guys. Do you believe Trump was a good president? And if so, explain.
God, no. He's a disgrace. I don't like to say, we don't say his name in my household. When I would speak to people about Trump, like, I mean, I got to a point where I stopped asking because like these people's, their beliefs are so, it's in my philosophy class, they're called axioms. So they're things that like, you were born, you were raised to think a certain way. Like this, you have this belief that you hold so strongly. There is nothing someone can do to change someone's axiom. It will all, you could have all the reason on your side. They will not change. I know there's not a point in trying to change these people's mind because they're stuck. They're stuck. And if they change their mind, it's going to be on their account.
So it's hard to, it depends. So like that, like I'm not old enough where like I could be like, yeah, like he, took so much off my taxes, like this, he benefited this. I think while he was president, he did things that like for himself and people like him, like wealthy, like higher class, like they benefited greatly from him, like not paying like taxes, like construction workers being able to like drill like inside of mountains, like do whatever they want. So like for him, he probably like had like the slight like increase, but like the damage he did like 10, 20 years down the line is probably going to be like detrimental to like the next the next president like down the line. It's gonna be so hard. I wouldn't say he was like a great president or even like good for that matter, but like I think he did good for his type of people, if that makes sense. So like yeah, so he did, in his mind, he looks in the mirror like best job I could possibly did. But like for people that he didn't touch, like things that completely would never affect them in their lifetime, that's what he's worried about. But meanwhile, like people like Obama, like trying to get people like out of like bad housing and like get them the healthcare that they need, like that's how we really come together as a country, is like you fix like the people that are in poverty and like doing the worst. So this way, like 10, 20 years down the line and the next generation to come, like they're better set up than like their parents were.
Absolutely not. absolutely not. But
Period.
at first, when he first got elected, I went, oh, what's the worst that can happen? You know, I was like, because for most of my life, I've known Obama as the president because he served 2 terms during my formative years. So I never really knew any other president at the time, or any, especially a Republican president. So I was like, okay, maybe it's for the best. Maybe, or I know we had that economic crash. Maybe we'll do better. And it was an absolute embarrassment. Anyone I talked to who was from overseas or anything like that, they would constantly mention him of being like, "Hey, what's the deal with your president?" Stuff like that. But he was just, not a good face for the nation. I guess is the best way to say it. Like, he did not represent our country well, and he was an embarrassment. You'd watch him on TV. My father and I would watch him on TV. We would put on that Fox News and we'd watch him on TV just to be like, "What's the deal?" And we would both look at each other and go, "I can't watch this. Can you?" I go, "No, I can't. But this is our president addressing our nation, and we can't even watch it." And I even followed him on Twitter for a bit because I wanted to know what was going on. And then I was like, I can't. I can't. He's ridiculous. And then COVID hits, and he does the worst job of planning, of preparing, the worst job of preventing, and lies to people. Gets COVID at his own event, and also, Obama had an entire playbook. Just because it had Obama's name on it, he wasn't even the only one who worked on it, but just because it has his name on it, Trump threw it out at the beginning of his presidency. And I think that's karma in the making right there. So
I want to say thank you to all 7 of you for coming on the podcast and having this conversation with me. Shout out to Joey, Nicole, Felipe, Charlotte, Cameron, Callie, and Matt. You guys kept it real, and I think we showed our listeners how to speak on so-called controversial topics and not be disrespectful to each other. It's not always easy, but we still must have conversations like these if we want to make progress as a society when it comes to defeating white supremacy. I want to leave you all with a quote from the late civil rights activist and sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois. A system cannot fail those it was never built to protect. Be sure to leave a rating for the Cervantes podcast on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the Cervantes podcast YouTube channel, and click the notification bell up top so you're notified whenever I upload a new episode. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good one.